Hello everyone, and welcome to our new general mathematics lesson. For today's lesson, we will talk about business and consumer loans. This is a very practical lesson and relevant topic since loans are part of our daily lives. Whether it's paying tuition, purchasing a vehicle, opening a business, or even paying emergency expenses. Loans are a major factor in the way people deal with money. Before we get started, let's discuss first the significance and definitions of some major terms associated with consumer loans and business loans. Before we proceed to the main discussion, knowing these terms clearly will facilitate our problem solving and application of concepts in the real world. So these are the terms that will pop out in our discussion for today. Loan means money borrowed that must be repaid, usually with interest. Consumer loans, a loan borrowed by an individual for personal needs. Business loan, a loan borrowed by a business for expansion, operation, or capital. Principal, the original amount borrowed. Interest, the extra amount paid for borrowing money. Rate, the interest rate expressed as a percentage or decimal. Time, the length of the money is borrowed. 8. Simple interest formula is I equals P times R times T. Future value, the total amount to be paid back. The formula of future value is A equals P plus I. Number 10, mortgage payment. A fixed monthly payment made to repay a loan. And lastly, number 11, outstanding balance. The remaining amount that has not yet been paid on the loan. So, we're done discussing all the terms. Now let's start to begin with our main discussion.
For our concept number 1 is finding the interest. So how do we find the interest? For example, a student borrows 20,000 pesos at 10% simple interest for 1 year. Find the interest. So how do we find the interest? Step 1. First, we have to convert the percent to decimal. So how do we turn our percent to decimal? It's just easy. Divide it by 100. So 10% is divided by 100 is equal to 0.10. We're done with our step 1. So let's start with our step 2. So the formula of solving the interest is I equals P times R times T. So let's substitute it to our formula. So the value of P is 20,000 and the value of our R is 0.10 and for our T is 1. So for our third step, we just gonna multiply it. So 20,000 times 0.10 times 1, it is 2,000. So that's the answer. So we're done for our example number 1, then let's move on to our example number 2. Anna borrows 15,000 at 8% for 2 years. So for our step 1, just like our example number 1, we have to convert our percent to decimal. So how do we do this? We just have to divide our percent to 100. So it will be make to a decimal. So 8 is divided by 100 equals 0.08. So we're done with our step 1. Let's move on to our step 2. For our step 2, let's substitute our formula to their values. So the value of our P is 15,000 pesos. And for our R, 0.08 times for our time is 2. Now, for our step 3, let's multiply them each. So 15,000 times 0.8 times 2 is equal to 2,400. So the answer of our example number 2 is 2,400. Moving on to our example number 3, Carlos borrows 50,000 pesos at 6% for 3 years. Just like the two examples that I gave you, they are just same process. Step 1 is converting our percent to decimal. Step 2 is substituting it to our formula. And lastly, for our step 3 is multiplying each value. So here, we're changing the percent to decimal. So 6 is divided by 100 is equal to 0.06. And moving on for our step 2, substituting the values to the formula. So for our P is 50,000 and for our R is 0.06 and for our time is 3 years. After that, we have to multiply each value. So 50,000 times 0.06 is equal to 3,000. So 3,000 is multiplied by 3 is equal to 9,000. So that is the answer. Moving on to our example number 4. Maria borrows 10,000 pesos at 12% for 9 months. Still same process, we have to convert our 12% to decimal. Make our 12% to a decimal, we have to divide it to 100. So 12 divided by 100 is equals to 0.12. So for our step 2, we have to convert our 9 months to years. So how do we do that? So let's convert 9 months to a year. So 1 year, how many months in a year? Is 12. 12 months. So the months will be cancelled. So 9 times 1 is 9. Then divided by 12 is equals to 0.75. Then after that, we will substitute the values to the formula. So the formula is I is equals to P times R times T. So the value of P is 10,000 and the value of R is 0.12 and the value of our time is 0.75. Then let's multiply it one by one. 10,000 is multiplied by 0.12 and the answer is 1,200 and 1,200 is multiplied by 0.75 is equal to 900. Here's a practice so you could try answering it by your own. Moving on to our second concept, which is future value. So, for example, using the interest from example number 1, how much must the student pay back after 1 year? Step 1. We should know about the formula about the future value, which is A is equal to P plus I. So, as we remember, our value of our P in our example number 1 is 20,000 and the value of our I is 2,000. So we have their values now. Let's just add them up so that we have their answer, which is 22,000 pesos. Moving on to our next example, Anna's interest was 2,400. So using the value of P and I in the example number 2 in solving for the interest. So the value of our P is 15,000 and our I is 2,400. Step 2, let's just add the principal and our interest using formula A equals P plus I. So 15,000 plus 2,400 is equals to 17,400. So that's the future balance that Anna will pay next time. Moving on to our example number 3, same process. We just have to use the value of our P and I in the example of the solving for the interest. So our value for our P is 50,000 and our I is 9,000. Step 2, using the formula A equals P plus I and substitute it to the formula 50,000 plus 9,000 is equals to 59,000. So that's the future value that Carlos will pay next time. I have 2 examples here so you guys could try and answer it by yourself. Now, we are in our concept number 3, which is monthly payment. So how do we solve this? For example, a business borrows 120,000 pesos at 12% simple interest for 1 year. Find the monthly payment. So how do we find this? First, let's list our values. So for our P is 120,000 and for our R is 12% and for our F is we're still finding it, and lastly for our T is 1 year. So we're done listing our values. Let's move on to step 1. Step 1 is finding the interest. First, we should make our 12% to decimal. Twelve percent is divided by 100 is equal to 0.12. So we have our decimal now. Now let's start solving for our interest. Using formula I is equal to P times R times T. So we have our formula now. Let's substitute their values. So for our P is 120,000 times by 0.12 is equal to 14,400. 14,400 times by the time, which is 1, is equals to 14,400. So we have our interest now. Then let's move on to our step 2. So for our step 2, let's find the total amount or the future value. The formula of finding the future value is A is equal to P plus I. So the value of RP is 120,000 plus by the interest, which is 14,400. Then equals to 134,400 pesos. So that's our future value, or A. So moving on, for our step 3 is convert to monthly payment. How to do that? The formula of this is A is divided by the time. So the value of RA is 134 and 400 divided by the time, which is 1 year, equivalent of 12 months, is equal to 11,200 pesos. So that's our monthly payment. Moving on to our example number 2, which is a business borrows 24,000 at 10% for 1 year. First, let's find our value. P is equal to 24,000. R is 10%. And for our F is we still finding, and our T is 1 year. So let's start our step 1. For our step 1, we will find the interest first. So the formula of the interest is I is equal to P times R times T. First, we will find our decimal. So let's change our 10% to decimal. Ten is divided by 100 is equal to 0.10. So we have our decimal now. So let's substitute the values to the formula. So for our P is 24,000 times by the 0.10 is equal to 2,400. So next, let's times the 2,400 to our time. So 2,400 times 1 is equals to 2,400. Moving on, that's our interest. So let's move on to our step 2. For step 2, let's find the future value. So the formula of finding the future value is A is equal to P plus I. So let's substitute the value to the formula. So A is equal to P, which is 24,000 plus our I, which is 2,400, is equal to 26,400. So we're done finding the future value. Now, let's move on to our step 3. For our step 3, our objective here is finding the monthly payment. So, our monthly payment formula here is A is divided by the time. So, the time in this given is 1 year. So, it's equivalent of 12 months. So, that's why it's 12. So, the value of A is 26,400 is divided by the year. So, 12 is equals 2,200. So, that's the answer. That's our monthly payment. So, let's move on to our example number 3. Anna decides to borrow 60,000 from the bank at 8% interest for 2 years. So same process as the 2 examples that I gave. First, let's find their values. For P is 60,000 and for our R is 8% and for our F is not yet given and RT is 2 years. So step 1, interest. First, let's make our percent to decimal, which is, let's make our 8% to decimal. So 8 is divided by 100 is equals to 0.08. Our formula here is I is equals P times R times T. So we're done with the formula, then let's substitute the values to the formula. So 60,000 is times to 0.08 is equals to 4,800. Next, let's multiply the 4,800 to the time, which is 2, is equals to 9,600. So we have our interest now. Now, let's move on to our step 2, which is finding the future value. How do we find future value? We find future value by using formula A is equals P plus I. Now, let's substitute their value. So, A is equals to P, which is 60,000, plus the value of I is 9,600 is equals to 69,600. Now, we're done finding our future value. Now, let's move on to our step 3, which is finding the monthly payment. So, the formula here is A divided by the time. In this situation, 12 will be times 2 because in months of a year is 12. But in the given is 2. So it will be 24. So after that, we will divide it now. So our A is 69,600 divided by our time, which is 24, so equals 2,900. And that's the answer. That's our monthly payment. Try to practice yourself. Moving on with our fourth concept, which is mortgage. Example, a motorcycle costs 60,000 pesos. Buyer pays 20,000 down payment. The rest is financed at 10% simple interest for 2 years. Find the mortgage. So, step 1, let's find the loan principal. How do we find the loan principal? We just have to minus the borrowed amount. So, the borrowed amount is 60,000 and the 20,000. So, subtract them, then it becomes to 40,000. So, we're done with our step 1. Then, let's proceed to our step 2. Our step 2 is finding the interest. So, the formula here is I is equal to P times R times T. First, we have to make our percent to decimal. Now, let's divide 10 to 100 equals 0.10. So we have our decimal now. Then let's proceed to substituting the values to the formula. So for our P is 40,000 and times by our rate is 0.10 is equal to 4,000. Then 4,000 is times by the year, which is 2 is equals to 8,000. So this is our interest. Now let's move on to our step 3, which is finding the mortgage. So how do we find mortgage? Finding the mortgage is we need P plus I. So we need that formula. So for our principal is 40,000 and for our interest is 8,000. It just got swapped, guys, but it's okay. Now add them and it will become 48,000. So that's our mortgage. So that's our answer for our example number 1. Moving on for our example number 2. Same process, guys. Our step 1, let's find the loan principal. So how do we find loan principal? We're just gonna subtract the amount borrowed. Now let's subtract it. So our principal is 500,000 subtracted by the down payment, which is 100,000, is equals to 400,000. So that's our loan principal. Now let's move on to step 2. For step 2, let's find the interest. How do we find the interest? Using formula I is equal P times R times T. First, we have to make our percentage to be decimal. So 8 is divided by 100 is equal to 0.08. So we have our decimal now. Then let's proceed to substituting the value to the formula. So for our P is 400,000 times by 0.08 times by 5. Now let's times it by H. So 400,000 times 0.08 is equal to 32,000 times by 5, and that's equal to 160,000. Now that's our interest. 160,000 is our interest. Now let's proceed to our step 3, is finding the mortgage. The formula for finding the mortgage is M is equal to P plus I. So now let's substitute it to our formula. So for our P is 400,000, then plus the value of our interest is 160,000, then it's equal to 560,000. Now that's our mortgage. That is our answer. Now we're done with our example number 2. Then let's proceed to our example number 3. For our example number 3, same process. Step 1, let's find first the loan principal. We have to subtract the amount that got borrowed. So the amount that got borrowed is 200,000 minus 50,000 is equal to 150,000. Now we have our loan principal. So let's proceed for our step 2. For our step 2, let's find our interest. To find our interest, let's use formula I is equal to P times R times T. First, let's change our percentage to decimal. So 10 is divided by 100 is equal to 0.10. Now we have our decimal. Now let's proceed to substituting the values to the formula. For our P is 150,000 times by 0.10 is equal to 15,000. Now 15,000 is multiplied by our time, which is 3, is equal to 45,000. Now we have our value of our interest. Now let's proceed to step 3, finding the mortgage. To find the mortgage, we need the formula M is equal to P plus I. Now let's substitute it to our formula. So for our P is 150,000 plus the I is 45,000 is equal to 195,000. So that is our mortgage. That's the answer. Try this yourself. Now let's move on to our last concept, which is outstanding balance. How to do this? For example, a company borrows 100,000 at 12% simple interest for 2 years. After 1 year, they pay 56,000. What is the outstanding balance? So, first, let's solve for the interest. Step 1. To find interest, we used formula I is equal to P times R times T. Before we proceed, we have to make our percentage to decimal. %12 is divided to 100 is equals to 0.12. Now we have our rate. Now let's substitute the values to the formula. So the value of RP is 100,000 times by our rate, which is 0.12, then equals 12,000. Now 12,000 times to our time, which is 2 years, then equals 24,000. Now that is our interest. Since we have our interest, we proceed to our step 2. To our step 2, our objective here is to find the future amount or the future value. Sorry for the handwriting, guys. So the formula to find the future amount is A is equal to P plus I. So let's substitute the value of the formula. So the value of our P is 100,000 and the I is 24,000. Then equals 124,000. So that is our future value. Now let's proceed to our step 3. For our step 3, our objective here now is finding the outstanding balance. We have to subtract so that we could know our outstanding balance. So let's subtract the amount that has got already paid. So the formula of finding the outstanding balance is, the formula to find the outstanding balance is A minus the amount that got paid. Now, let's substitute the value. of our A and the amount that get paid. So the value of our A is 124,000 minus the amount that get paid is 56,000. Now subtract them, then the answer is 68,000 pesos. So this is the outstanding balance, the answer. Now, moving on for our example number 2. Maria borrowed 200,000 at 10% interest for 2 years. After paying 80,000, she now wants to know her outstanding balance. So first, let's solve for the interest. Same process as the example I gave. So for step 1, let's find the interest. To find the interest, we need the formula I equals px times r times t. Now, we have our formula. So let's start changing our percentage to decimal. So 10 is divided by 100, so equals to 0.10. Now, let's substitute our value to the formula. So for our P is 200,000 and for our R is 0.10 and that is equal to 20,000. So 20,000 times our time, which is 2, is equal to 40,000. Now, that's our interest. Now, let's move on to our step 2. For our step 2, we are gonna find the future amount. To find the future value, we need the formula A is equal to P plus I. So A is equal the value of our P, which is 200,000, plus the value of our I is 40,000 and equals to 240,000. Now, we have our future value. Now, let's proceed to our last step, which is finding the outstanding balance. So the formula to find the outstanding balance is A minus the amount paid. So now let's substitute the value to the formula. So for the value of our A is 240,000 and for our amount paid is 80,000 and equals to 160,000. And that is our outstanding balance. That is the answer. Now let's proceed for our example number 3. Same process as the 2 examples that I gave you guys. Step 1, interest. To find the interest, we need the formula I is equal to Px r times t. Before that, we have to make our percentage to decimal. So how do we do that? We have to divide our 12% to 100. So 12% divided by 100 is equal to 0.12. Now, we have our decimal. So let's start to substitute the values to the formula. So for our P is 150,000 and for our R is 0.12 and equals to 18,000. And 18,000 is times to our time, which is 3, is equal to 54,000. So now we have our interest. Now let's move on to our step 2. For our step 2, we have to find future value. To find future value, our formula for that is A is equal to P plus 1. I. So our value for our P is 150,000 and for our I is 54,000. Then equals 204,000. So our future value was 204,000. Now let's proceed to our step 3, outstanding balance. To find outstanding balance, we need formula A minus the amount paid. Now we have the formula. So let's substitute the values to the formula. So the value for our A is 204,000 minus the amount paid was 100,000 is equal to 104,000. So that is our outstanding balance. Now you can try this yourself.